The information contained in this video is strictly for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or other professional advice and is not a substitute for consultation with a qualified professional. The opinions expressed in the show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and the City University of New York. State of Mind is a web-based discussion program that explores the relevant social, economic, and political issues that are prominent at the post-secondary level of education. State of Mind is sponsored by the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. BMCC. Start here, go anywhere. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind. Continuing on our Buddy, Can You Spare a Job series, today's topic is about college graduates, hard skills, or hardly working. Earlier this year, a Gallup poll sponsored by the Lumina Foundation revealed that 14% of Americans and only 11% of business leaders strongly agree that graduates have the necessary skills and competencies to succeed in the workplace. That's in stark contrast to another recent survey conducted by Inside Higher Ed in conjunction with Gallup, indicating that 96% of academic officers believe that they're effectively preparing students for success in the workplace. Understanding that in today's economic and financial climate, more and more employers are looking for college graduates with job-ready skill sets, it begs the question that students and recent graduates all across the country are faced to ask, am I workforce ready? Back with us to help better understand the various perspectives on the topic are the following guests. Sarah Lovenheim from the Young Invincibles, and Dean Christian Brady from the Schreier Honors College at Penn State University. Sarah, Dean Brady, thank you once again for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So we talked about the themes of hard skills and being job ready in our last episode, but I want to continue with that thought process. You know, it used to be that a traditional liberal arts education was a great foundation to really build off of in terms of eventually looking forward to a full-time job. But it seems now in this current economic climate, especially since 2008, we're talking more about having skills that are very clear and concise in terms of putting them on your resume and not necessarily ones that are more soft in terms of their nature. Dean Brady, I'd like to start with you. How is the academic environment currently responding to this in terms of curriculum? And if they are, what type of measures are being put in place?
Well, I think there's a little bit of tension might be the right word, because in higher education, we obviously want to be responsive to the marketplace. We want our students to graduate and get jobs, but we also recognize that the mission of a higher education institution is education. It's beyond training. As we talked about in the last episode, I think there's a real role and an opportunity that we've missed by foregoing training opportunities for those who probably don't need a bachelor's degree. All of that being said, most universities today recognize this and have career development centers. We have one of the largest in the nation at Penn State University. We have the largest job fair, incredibly robust internship programs. They tend to be located in each of the academic units so that the specificity needed for a given field can be met. So for example, Smeal College of Business or the College of Engineering at Penn State, they work directly with the employers that their students are likely to be going to create partnerships and opportunities for internship, research opportunities where appropriate, so that our students are in demand in the workforce and ready for that.
Excellent. Sarah, from the standpoint of an employer, and more importantly, the research that you're seeing that employers are currently putting out, what is the relationship that they have with academic institutions? It sounds like what Dean Brady provided is a very healthy relationship in terms of making sure that employers can come to campus, can make sure they vet out students correctly. But what is it that they're seeing or not seeing once they get into the interview table?
Well, right now we're hearing that employers are not seeing as many young people, millennials we're talking about, prepared with those hard skills when they leave college. What we're finding at Young Invincibles is that probably part of that stems from a lack of knowledge that young college students have themselves before choosing a curriculum to enter. So for example, most school programs do not provide information tied to how many college students actually graduate from particular programs. And you also can't track today how many young people from any particular college program are landing in jobs right after graduating from whatever program they choose. So that's a real problem from our generation. If you're a student and you're in your freshman or sophomore year, you want to know before choosing a major, before pursuing the curriculum of your choice to prepare yourself for the job market, you want to know exactly how prepared other members of, previous alumni have actually been. And right now there's what we call a unit record ban. So the federal government is not requiring schools to provide that information. So there's this lack of knowledge out there for young people, and it's really hard to know as a student whether you're going to be ready, and it's really hard as employers to know whether students from particular college programs are going to have the skills that you're looking for as a result as well.
Now, most colleges and universities are making that information available, so the students simply need to ask for it.
Sure.
Even in the College of Liberal Arts, for example, at Penn State, we make a great effort so that our students know, here's the kinds of jobs that you can get when you come out of these different fields. Here are the things, the opportunities we have for you while you're an undergraduate to prepare you to get you into that position.
Sure.
So I do think we want to encourage the juniors and seniors in high school to do the due diligence, because while the federal government doesn't mandate the reporting, and I for one don't think that they should, we respond to the market just like any other industry. And so we at Penn State, but I know this is true of all of our colleagues, will make that information available on our recruitment sites, because students want to go to schools that are going to prepare them in ways that are going to get them into either the graduate program or the workforce that they intend to enter. So doing the due diligence, I think, is there.
So I do have to ask one question, because in our previous episode we talked about academic institutions, we talked about employers. This time I'd like to ask, what is the ownership of the student? Ultimately, it is them as a consumer that has to go out and do the due diligence, as we referred to. Different than when I look to buy a car, when I look to buy a house, when I look to pay for an education. How much upon themselves do they have to say, this is on me? I have to make sure I find that information, regardless of whether or not it's readily available, or if I have to talk to people, network, whatever that may be. Sarah?
So, yeah, to a certain extent, a student is, yes, responsible for doing his or her own research. But because there's a lack of data out there, it's really hard to responsibly do that research as a young person. Certainly Penn State, it sounds like, is providing a lot of the information that we at Young Invincibles would like more colleges out there to provide. But let's take the for-profit college industry, for example. 10% of college students are going to for-profit colleges today.
And for our audience, can you just elaborate, what is for-profit education?
Sure. So these are academic institutions that have shareholders at the heads of their table making the decisions about the types of curriculums and the types of students that they're bringing in to their campuses. And shareholders, at the end of the day, operate more like businesses do, rather than your typical academic institution like Penn State. And as a result, we're seeing that for-profit college institutions are not providing information to students, and they have, in many cases, the majority of shoddy programs out there that are not preparing young people for the workforce. They have higher student loan default rates, for example, than any other type of academic institution. And so this lack of information needs to be provided so that more students across the board can make responsible decisions. However, I would just add that if you want to be a responsible student, one step you could take, even with the lack of information out there, is to talk to alumni of a particular program that you're interested in, to find out how they fared in the job market, to find out what sort of skills and knowledge they perhaps wish they had had when they were students in that same program that you as a prospective student are considering.
So to that point of alumni and university administration, Dean Brady, I have to defer to you on that.
Well, let me first say, the for-profit is interesting, and it's in response to this degree inflation that we talked about last episode. The student is looking and saying, I need a degree and I want to do it in an expeditious way. Maybe academically they don't just have the talent, and so they're going that route. It's a small percentage. I can't think of any of the major colleges and universities that would take that approach, that wouldn't make this information available. And we do it because, as I said, it's what the consumer is demanding, it's what our students demanding. I also want to take the time to mention the real uniqueness about higher education.
Sure.
Our customer is our product. And so the students that we're taking in, I mean, they're our customer, they're coming and they're paying for education, but they're also what we put out into the workforce to other graduate and professional schools. And so in administration, we're in this interesting position of wanting to be responsive to who's going to be taking our students on the back end, on the way out, and listening to the concerns of our students, our customer, so to speak, coming in. But at the same time, we're not 17, 18-year-olds. We recognize 17, 18-year-olds don't always know what's best for themselves. And trying to balance that and understand, you know, in almost any other field, we would defer to the experts in the field about how to build a car best. But we're in an industry where people say, no, I know best how you need to provide me with my education. So there should never be a black wall or a black box put around this data or this information. And we need to continue to make sure that that's available so that they're well informed. But I do think, coming back to our question, that the students, the prospective students do absolutely need to take a role in it. And a good institution will make alumni available, make current students available. I always say to students as we're recruiting them, especially as we get down to the last part, I said it doesn't matter whether an institution has the courses on the books that you want, or even necessarily that they seem to have the product that you want. You've got to make sure it's the right fit for you, it's the right place to be. And the only way you can find all these things out is communication. And if you just, you know, when I went to college, you were limited, we didn't have the internet. God, I sound old. But you were limited to the places that you could physically go to and the mailings that they sent you. And everything was at an arm's length. And it was too much the other direction of we know best for the kids. We're not there anymore. I think we need to be responsive. And one of the ways in which higher ed is responsive is when the students are demanding and saying, I want to know more about it. And I think most appropriate institutions are meeting that response.
Sarah?
Beyond post-secondary institutions, I think we also have to look at high schools because high schools have a real shortage today of counselors. And we know that particularly in, let's say, immigrant families where English is not the first language, families cannot play the role of college counselors or prospective college counselors to, you know, their kids who are thinking about where they want to go to school after they graduate and get that high school diploma. So at Young Invincibles, we are demanding that the government start spending more money to invest in counseling programs across the country. Right now, there are 500 students at the high school level for every one counselor. And that means that many young people who have questions about how to navigate their college options are not even able to sit at the table to get some answers. We think there should be at least a ratio of 1 to 250, which is still pretty high, but that's another way we could start helping prospective college students get more information about what's out there for them today. So,
please. As you say, I agree completely, and also the access to the internet is not as ubiquitous as we often think that it is. The so-called digital divide and exactly where that falls down, whether it's socioeconomic or geographic, rural versus urban and so forth. But either way, a lot of information can be gained there. And a lot of the people who need the information the most aren't able to access it. So whether a combination of things, but certainly the guidance counselor plays a key role for all the reasons you just mentioned.
Oh, you could also just say that there's information overload out there for young people too. There's a lot of faulty information out there, misinformation really, that tries to point students in the wrong direction. For example, to some of these for-profit college programs that are really failing their students, not setting them up for the job market, graduating them with really high student loan debt that's higher than the national average. For example, not so long ago, I remember seeing a TV ad telling you know, anybody viewing it that they could become an astronaut if they enrolled in a for-profit college program. Well, most for-profit college programs are not going to set students up for the engineering background that they need that usually requires a post-secondary education and, you know, advanced degrees beyond the college level to pursue some, you know, some work in that field. If you want to be an astronaut, you've got to have very advanced degrees, and most for-profit schools.
Or simply a lot of money.
That's true too. And most for-profit schools can't provide that today.
So the general theme I'm hearing is, and I, just for full disclosure, I'm a first-generation immigrant myself. is really about the communication. If we're talking about our topic of hard skills and being job ready, I definitely see what you're saying about having proper guidance, whether it be through a guidance counselor or just a mentor, alumni, someone who can come to you and tell you, hey, look, these are the steps you need to put in place to at least put you in a position to potentially succeed. There's no guarantees in life by any means, but at least you know the information at the right time to be able to then make the decisions that ultimately are your responsibility. I think that's something that, to your point, we need to see more of. And that you can't get necessarily, like you said, if there's overload on the internet, if there's too much information out there, that one-to-one ability to connect with someone goes a long way in terms of the success downstream.
Well, and I know you talk quite a lot on this program about what makes a student successful and taking them into the next level. And a lot of it is this sort of ownership, this intentionality. And one key area that I always recommend for anybody is mentoring. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether you're our age or 17, 18 years old. And I had the benefit from very young age of having a friend of the family who became a mentor to me and remains so, mm-hmm. who was in psychiatry. Part of why I thought I wanted to go into medicine was following him. But he was also the person who sat down with me my freshman year and said, you don't have to do med school. It's okay. A mentor is vitally important, I think, in everybody's lives. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes we realize late, oh, that person was a mentor to me. I think when you're in in high school, junior, senior in high school, start looking around and go and talk with those people, because it's very rare somebody says, I would like to be your mentor. You know, you've got to ask for that. Yeah. And maybe it's not, I want you to be my mentor, but tell me how it is that you went into finance. Mm-hmm. What is it that drew you there? How did you get there? Those kind of things, you know, we in our institution try and provide them structurally. All of our honor students get a faculty advisor, and I call them faculty mentors from day one for just that reason. My chemistry advisor at Cornell remained actually a mentor to me for a number of years beyond college, and again, was one of those folks who said, you don't have to do this. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly right, Krishna. That's where you can find out, is this really a field for me? And if so, here are the things that you ought to do. Here's the way to go. That really is not something we should expect any particular institution to be doing for us. We need to take the initiative ourselves.
Sure. I think we talked about internships earlier, and internships can be you know, just a great place, a good setting for those mentorships to develop. I know many young people we talk to all the time at Young Invincibles have told us that they've gained a mentor through an internship program they've had. Mm-hmm. Again, though, having an internship requires being very savvy and knowing exactly what skills you're looking to build. For a lot of young people, even finding an internship today in today's really tough job market is a challenge.
So let's take a second to talk about the current job market, but also how it ties to millennials. Traditionally, let's go back a quarter century, you work for one company, you work for it for the entirety of your career, you retire, you get a gold watch, you get a nice pension, you go on your way. That paradigm has changed, has it not? No one has that type of a career anymore. There are no, for lack of a better example, no more Derek Jeters out there where you play for one team. And as such, myself included, I've worked at multiple firms in the last decade. Starting with you, Sarah, from a millennial standpoint, how has that changed from our topic of hard skills? Because if you're not necessarily going to have one career at one firm, where does that really play into all of this?
Well, first, to your point about the job trends shifting for the millennial generation, I want to just point you to a Forbes study that we looked at recently that found the average millennial stays in a job for less than 3 years today. Okay. So that's just some confirmation to what you were pointing to earlier. And I do think it's indicative of you know, some new restraints that employers have when choosing who to hire and why. However, it also goes back to the importance of those hard skills, because hard skills such as computer programming do not necessarily require a young person today to be wedded to one particular field or one particular employer. Those are skills that are actually very versatile for our generation, any sort of technology skill I'm talking about. Sure. And those are the skills, too, that are going to make millennials have a leg up in the job market over any other generation today. Sure. Because we're the generation that grew up with the internet. No other generation today grew up with the internet. So I would actually say it's to millennials' advantage to gain those hard skills and, you know, think about building those first and thinking about a field to enter second.
Interesting. Brady?
So, start by saying I don't don't think I'm going to disagree. I disagree with you, though it may sound this way. Second, that mentor I was referring to used to always say to me, Chris, you need to define terms before you go into a discussion. And we probably should have defined hard skills. Sure. I think when most people, like in these surveys, talk about hard skills, they are talking about very specific abilities. You know, if you're going to do accounting, you need to have that ability and so forth. I think what you're alluding to, Krishna, is the development of what I would call fungible skills. Yes. And that's what you were describing, Sarah. That yes, you know how to do certain things, but more importantly, you're pulled back far enough, or you're taught them, I should say, in such a way that they give you an elevated view of it, so that, yeah, I'm learning how to do this kind of coding right now. HTML coding hardly happens anymore at all, right? I mean, there's all sorts of other kinds of coding that you do. And if you were just stuck in that way, in that particular set, really hard skill, then you're fine until the world changes. You know, the whole buggy whip in cars sort of thing. But on the other hand, if you are not just trained but educated, then you can take that skill set, those abilities, and that's really what we're hearing from recruiters very specifically. Sure. Is that, yeah, when we have a certain job, we're probably going to need certain skill sets, but more than that, if we want people who are going to truly become leaders in our corporation and are going to do well and continue on, we want them to also have this broader vision and this broader view. And that's where I do think, if not a liberal arts education, then certainly a foundation in a general education curriculum alongside your engineering or science or what have you is vital.
Sure, and we certainly do find that analytic skills need to go hand in hand with those hard skills we were talking about. It's not enough to have computer literacy today. You also have to know how to analyze it very quickly if you want to stay ahead of the rest of the market. So I certainly agree with you to that point, and I think it's something that any sort of college graduate should keep in mind.
Right. So let's talk about the employers now. If we have this new paradigm where, you know, students aren't necessarily looking to spend 25 years at one firm, and yet we see at the beginning of the show, we talked about a study where business leaders didn't feel that students had, to your point, the defined definition of hard skills. How are employers responding to the fact that you may not have a college graduate with you for more than 3 to 5 years, and are they okay with that?
Well, I think many employers out there are changing their relationship and requirements of potential employees. So, for example, more employers today are allowing their employees to telework than ever before. So they're not investing in that desk space or that desktop computer that everyone used to have. Sure. They're allowing their employees to work from almost anywhere in the country, because teleworking can let you work anywhere, right? And that's having, you know, that's setting a new foundation for the employer to employee relationship that our parents' generation experienced, which allows the employer to invest a little bit less in the employee, and also allows the employee to, you know, work on his or her own time often in more, you know, flexible hours. That, you know, really has this probably cost benefit that we haven't discussed so much yet, but that will pay off in the long term and let employers be able to keep hiring millennials without worrying about investing maybe as much as their predecessors did.
Dean Brady, do you see with your students, as they're looking to move from summer internships to full-time jobs, that compromise on both sides of the table is something that employers are looking to at least come a little bit more to the table with?
Well, we talk about employers as if it's something monolithic, right? I mean, there's such a diversity in what's out there. There are some companies that still take a very traditional role. When they bring somebody in, they really do want them for a career. IBM and GE tend to do that, and what they're doing in response is they're letting their recruits know there's all sorts of opportunities for you. Maybe it is a flexible work schedule. You might be able to work at home. Here's a leadership path. A lot of our students are hired into many of these companies directly into a particular leadership program that's already there, and that gets them locked in, and they're guaranteed that if they continue along in 3 years or 5 years, they'll move into another path. So there's lots of things that the employers are doing to try and engage there. But then there are other companies that are saying, yeah, we want you here for a year or two, whatever it is that you want, and then we're going to be flexible. We're going to keep moving. We're going to keep rolling with it. So it's hard to have any sort of real generalization on it. That's why I think it is so important for our students to go in with an awareness of who they are, the experiences that they've had, and be able to translate it right there at the table with the interviewer as to here's what I can bring to you, and then be thinking, well, in 2 years I may be talking to somebody else.
Right.
You could argue, though, that employers are also not incentivizing millennials to stay at their places of employment.
Sure.
For example, we've seen pensions disappear at most big companies
That's
today, and you could argue that, well, if you're not going to get the incentive of a pension, maybe it's in your best interest as a millennial over the course of time to move around and to experience different types of workplace environments.
Sure, and especially with the advent of 401ks almost everywhere, you can roll those over from firm to firm and not lose the buildup of equity that you've built.
Yeah, it's important to recognize we are in a different environment. We have this, as I mentioned in our last episode, we have this tendency to sort of think back as to when we were young, or when the work context of our parents and so forth. The economic environment is incredibly different now, and so there are all these other sorts of tensions. The pensions are not there. The state pensions aren't there.
Sure.
So the incentives are quite a bit different. And the millennials or the Gen Xers or the boomers and so forth, we're all going to be responding slightly differently depending upon where we are and our passions. There are also some careers in some fields where you got to get stuck in, and you got to keep moving. We haven't really talked about the culture of the millennials, and again, I'm the last person to try and generalize overall, but there certainly are some differences here. This generation is the so-called digital natives, internet generation. There is an entrepreneurial spirit. Maybe that's the result of this generation. Maybe it's the result of the recession. Either way, there is a kind of willingness to try new and different things.
Sure.
So that's the other aspect. Employers are aware of it. Universities and colleges are aware of it. And so we try to respond accordingly with, at least in our case, not leaving our mission behind.
Right.
Yeah, I want to speak to that dichotomy for a second because it really is fascinating. Our generation is still suffering the most from the Great Recession that happened 5 years ago when it comes to job prospects, when it comes to wages, and when it comes to just the pressures and the cost associated with any big life decisions such as buying a house or a car or anything like that we just can't do so much of because we're burdened by student loan debt. But we're studying growing trends among millennials in the workforce right now at Young Invincibles, and we're finding that our generation, even for those who are unemployed, is a very optimistic generation. And we do have an entrepreneur spirit about us, and in the long run I do think that will help our generation bounce back from some of these real economic hardships that are very unique right now to millennials in particular.
Well, I'd like to take a couple minutes to segue because that's a great topic to really apply into what the school that you cover, Dean Brady. Take a few minutes, talk to us about honors education and specifically the Schreier Honors College.
Sure. Well, honors education is at its core designed to provide outstanding students with opportunities to succeed academically, really challenge them, take them farther. Historically, they've grown up in our state universities as a way to keep our best and brightest within our state rather than going off to elite privates. At Penn State, the Schreier Honors College has a particular mission: achieve academic excellence with integrity, that's pretty common, build a global perspective and create opportunities for leadership and civic engagement. We're really looking for that well-rounded student. We're fairly small, and we're keenly aware of that. And so within Penn State as a whole, we have academically successful students with 3.9s, 4.0s across the board. But honors education for us is marrying these together. And so that I liken it to whether it's athletics or in the business world, it's not a success at all cost atmosphere. One of the scariest things in the world to me are really, really smart people with no ethics or mores to bound them and bind them. And that's the approach that we're taking at Penn State, is to continue to challenge them and provide them with those opportunities, but also help them to think through, I've created this new and amazing genetic test. This is awesome, I can get it patented and so forth and so on. But let's think through what the impact is going to be on the health industry, for example. Can I still get health insurance, or are they now going to demand that I have this test, and so on and so forth. It's the opportunity, though. It's the challenge to them that we're working on the most.
Right. Well, it looks like, I think as tough as a topic as this has been to speak to, it does seem like there's a lot of optimism heading into the future for the millennials. So on that note, Sarah, Dean Brady, once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
That'll wrap up our show for today. Once again, I'd like to thank our guests for their unique perspectives. If you like what you saw in today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback for myself, don't hesitate to reach out via email or Twitter. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. And remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.